Hello, welcome to a new session of the Aspen Ideas Forum. This is actually sort of a part two of a debate we already had last week, where we had about 20 people in a virtual conversation. Today, I'm going to be discussing, with William Powers and Christoph Steck only. I am Noelia Amoedo. And let me start by, first of all, thanking the Aspen Institute in Spain and Telefónica for giving us the opportunity of having sessions around tech and society and taking a step back of our day-to-days to think about how we can use technology for the good of society, which is amazing to have the opportunity to talk about. Thank you very much. Today, we're going to be talking about how we can improve confidence in the use of digital services so that we can complete a more human-centric digital transition. And we're going to be doing that with two experts in the matter. And let me start by introducing them briefly, although I could talk extensively about each of their bios. William Powers, I can call you Bill, right?
Yes, please.
Great. Bill has had a long career as a journalist, as a writer, and as a technologist. And he's written extensively about how to use technology for a more humane world. Even though you have a degree in history and literature, right, Bill? You have ventured into technology and you actually wrote a book called Hamlet's BlackBerry, Building a Good Life in the Digital Age. And I believe a sequel will be coming soon.
Not a sequel, just a new book.
A new book, okay, okay. Yeah. But is it going to be around the same type of...
Related. I'm not allowed to talk about it because I have a co-author, but yeah, related.
We don't want to put you in trouble. Okay, I continue with the introduction after the book.
Thank you.
You were an MIT Media Lab research scientist. Working on projects that look to ensure artificial intelligence enables social progress and reflects human values as opposed to the opposite. And today you're a visiting scholar at the Center for Humans and Machines at the Max Planck Society in Berlin, where you continue to work on humanistic technology. So couldn't be more relevant for the conversation that we're having today. Thank you very much, Bill, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
And then we have Christoph Steck, who is the Director of Public Policy and Internet for Telefónica and also an associate professor at the IE School of Human Sciences and Technology. And at Telefónica, Christoph oversees the strategy and development of Telefónica's public policy, defines its positions in digital policy, internet, and anything that has to do with digital economy. He is a human rights lawyer by training, right, Christoph?
Yes, that's true.
Right. And I have a long list of initiatives that you're part of, either as a founder, chair, vice chair, board member, advisor, but I don't think I have time to go through all of them. They're all extremely interesting or related to digital technology, technologies such as blockchain. So again, your experience couldn't be more relevant for the session that we're going to have. Thank you so much for joining us as well.
Thank you for having me here.
Thank you. So I guess with that, I can start by asking the first question. And I'll ask questions, but of course, please feel free to just, go in any direction that is relevant. The use of digital technology, of course, has shaped our societies and our democracy. There's no question about it. And a few years ago, we were all, or most of us, very utopic about the internet and new technologies. It was all opening a world of new possibilities. And lately, we're more bombarded by dystopian views of everything that could go wrong, and how I've read even how technology can destroy us as humans, right? And destroy our humanity. What is your view? Are you more of an optimistic or a pessimistic? And each of you can, I mean, you can go in any order you prefer.
Go first, Bill.
Okay.
No, you go first.
Thank you. Thank you. So it's a really important question because we are living through a kind of a dystopian moment, I think. My take is, I wrote the book that you referenced over a decade ago, and it was an optimistic book about the future of the digital age. And I looked back at previous revolutions and found, going all the way back to ancient Greece and the invention of the alphabet, which is actually a technology of a sort, I found that there's always a lot of not just debate, but concern and even crisis around new technologies. And they disrupt, of course, that's the famous verb. And we're still in that moment now. But what has happened historically consistently is that people figure out how to make these technologies work for society and how to use them to take us to a better place. It's not always the perfect solution, and we're always continuing to work on it, but that happens over and over again. I think we're in that moment now again, and I think the dystopian wave that we're living through is a very good sign, because it shows that we are actually thinking deeply about the dark consequences so that we can avoid them. So optimist.
Very good. How about you, Christoph?
Well, I think I'm also an optimist, and I think a little bit for the same reasons Bill just mentioned. I think that, of course, we cannot just let technology and digitalization disrupt our lives as it's happening and happening faster and faster without kind of steering or guiding it. So I think for me, the part why I'm optimistic is because I think that we had basically this kind of conscious now that this is something that is impacting our lives so much, and impacting our human rights and so on so much, that we really need to take it seriously, and we need to kind of think about what kind of systems we want to have, what kind of values we want to have, and how we want to steer the whole development. I have to say that with the recent pandemic, for example, we have seen that digitalization is also a great help, and we can use many of the technologies to also help us to improve as societies and as humanity, if you want to say so. But we need to do it in the right way, and I'm optimistic because I think that now it's a good moment in time, and we have to go maybe from this initial start where things have been a little bit too optimistic and maybe a little bit too naive even, and now maybe the last time where we have seen a lot of dystopian view, sorry, we should go to something which is more realistic, which is that we have to basically find a human-centric digitalization. We have to find a way that we basically put digitalization and technology based on the values we have built up over the last years and generations, and that's important.
Right, thank you. So it's good to have optimism. We need optimism in our world, but be realistic also, right? And it's clear that some things haven't gone the right way, and it's clear also that has generated that lack of confidence that we want to solve, right? If we all want to transition in a humane world. So what do you think are the specific elements that could help maybe reinforce that that trust that maybe has been lost lately by some? How can we build more confidence on the use of these services?
Christoph, please go.
Christoph, you can go. I'm going to start naming it easier.
I think that, I mean, first of all, I think there's a bigger picture here around confidence. I think that it's not only technology kind of creating distrust or growing the lack of confidence. I think that we have seen in general a development over the last years that basically people feel more and more that their lives is not maybe improving. I think that you can see that, for example, when you look at Western, at least democracies, there is a feeling that that life has not improved from generation to generation, that we have a standstill, or maybe even in some parts of societies, basically life is getting worse. So we have to be very careful. And I think these are economic reasons, and that's a debate on its own. But I mean, I think technology has supported that, but it's not the only factor. But we have to make sure that we basically kind of leave no one behind in that kind of transition to a new economic model. And I think that's where I'm concerned that we need to take bigger steps, actually, and more active help with education, with help from the public side, from the state, to bring people back into that new kind of economy, because it's clear that the work is changing. We will see new kind of employments coming up. We need new kind of capabilities for people. And I think that's a key issue, this kind of feeling that digitalization will improve our lives, the technology will improve our lives, and not make it necessarily only more complex, or we have, problems with disinformation and filter bubbles and all these kind of things. So we need to kind of get back this kind of feeling that there is something in here for me. And I think, again, that will need some policy making and some responsibility from companies as well. I think that when you offer some of these really transformational technologies and you use it, I think it's very important that companies are aware of these societal impacts. In a sense, it's a bit like with the impact on the environment. I think we have learned that companies feel responsible for the impact they have on the environment, and rightly so. And I think we should also feel responsible for the societal impact we create as technology companies, and should kind of do the right steps together with the public and the public administrations to kind of keep basically things moving to the right direction.
I agree with Christoph completely. Well said. Thank you. I would add that over here in the United States, where I am, I'm in Massachusetts, USA. We have seen this dramatic spillover of economic discontent that you referred to our politics, as you have seen, and technology really playing a very negative role, largely in not just through filter bubbles, but misinformation, disinformation, all these sort of forces feel like they're making our entire public sphere toxic and really heading in the opposite direction of where we want to head. I do believe that getting the companies to be more aware of their impact, and of course they're being seen as villains now, so they have to be aware. But getting them aware not just of the impact, as you said, Christoph, but also of their duty to take a new path and to be more involved in thinking about social impacts and policies that incorporate, as you said, human values. There have been some big developments since we talked last week in terms of societies thinking about these questions and trying to take actions. One is the Digital Markets Act in Europe that you had predicted was coming, and it came, I believe. And
it came finally.
Yeah, and the other is two different efforts in the United States, one by the US government to break up Facebook, which we talked about. And those are both reactions, to, one sort of defensive, the one in the US, and the other attempt to be positive and constructive, the one in Europe. And I think we need more of both, really.
Right. So you've mentioned in your responses multiple constituencies, right? So there's the companies and the responsibility of the companies. There's also what's expected from the government, as Christoph mentioned. So how do you see that balance between corporations, the government, and then there's also the individual responsibility, right? And is there new regulation that is required, or is what we have already, generic enough that can apply to the digital world? What is your view?
Well, I think if I start, I think that we need, all three. I mean, you said, individuals, you said business and institutions. I think honestly we need to change. the behavior on all three kind of angles, if you want to say so. To start with business, of course, I think, as I said before, we have to be aware that using artificial intelligence is not just another technology. I mean, that's a technology that can have, not always, but can have very severe impacts on people's lives, and we need to use it in an accountable way. That's key, and I think it's good to see that actually most technology companies are trying to do that. I'm not saying that everything is perfect already, but at least there is a feeling that this is not, you know, just another service and product you can throw on the market. And there's also some learning happening, I think, around transparency and around how can you explain at least what's going on. And there are many questions around it, and I think Bill can speak about it for a lot of time because it's not easy. But I think at least there is this feeling of we have to be really responsible in the use of that. So that's good. But let's be honest, I think it's not going to be only kind of self-regulation or codes of conduct. They're helpful, but they're not sufficient. I think that we also will need to see how institutions can also create some oversight a certain way about you know, for example, artificial intelligence, and also in general, you know, we see that, and Bill just mentioned it, the initiatives around you know, competition, around creating more or better use of platforms and so on. So I think that institutions will have to modernize policies. They will have to modernize the way they do things. They can, by the way, become better in using technology themselves, for example, database services to maybe create better oversight and know better what's going on. And they would also need to help people, as I said before, and also, for example, small and medium enterprises to be able to digitalize in a better way and faster. Because coming back again to the pandemic, I think that it's key. We have to realize that we have now already digital societies. I mean, the pandemic has kind of put us in an even faster digitalization than before. So we are already digital. We are doing these kind of things now already via digital channels in different ways. We work different, we live different, we entertain ourselves differently. And I think that will stay. This is here to stay. But we are lacking a lot of the modernization on the policy regulatory side to be able to cope with that. So I think that's for sure. And then individuals, to be honest, as I said before, I think we have to get better and more educated as well in using all these different possibilities we have. Let's face it, it's also great. I mean, we can use many new possibilities in a good way to create businesses, to be innovative, to be connected, and that's all super. I mean, again, let's imagine for a second we would have had the lockdown without the possibility of using the internet and without the possibility of using and being connected through digital means. That would have been horrible. It would have been simply unimaginable. I mean, imagine the impact on our economies, imagine the impact on our social lives, on ourselves. And I think that we should be aware that there is no way back. I mean, it's not that we're going to go back to something in 2019. 2019 is gone forever. We are going to go into 2021, and that's going to be a world that is going to look very, very different. And we have to be to help people to cope with that. Disruptions coming faster and faster, and people will need help. Some people will cope on their own, but some people will not. And we have to be much more supportive from business side, but also from, as I said before, the public side, to do the right planning, to do the right policies, to help people to cope with these changes.
And Bill?
Yeah, I would say I support everything you said, Christoph, and I would again, speaking from the U.S. perspective, I would note that we really need a lot of tutoring and instruction from you guys on the regulation part and on government getting involved, because we're way behind on that. And in fact, you know, the internet itself, as a medium and then as a business, was really born under the impression, and it turns out to be a delusion, that it would never need to be regulated. You know, if you go back to John Perry Barlow's Declaration of the Independence of Cyberspace in the 1990s, it was leave us alone. You know, this is the new paradise we're building here. And that turned out to be wrong. It also fed into the idea that these companies can just do what they want and everything will work out, and it's not working out. And Europe really has been so far ahead in thinking about these things. We're good at doing startups. You guys are good at thinking about how to have a society that's holding on to its values. And as I said in our conversation last week, I really hope we can somehow unite the two and, in a way, sort of reach across the Atlantic again, as we have done in the past, to solve big problems. And this is the one we need to solve. Now, I totally agree. Lots of great things are happening with these technologies. I recently wrote an op-ed in the Boston Globe about a few examples, but there's a lot of work to be done, and I hope we can do it together.
Right. So I think you both agreed that there is regulation that is needed, but at the same time, I remember somebody mentioned in the conversation we had last week that there is also well, I don't know how much is perception of reality that regulation can kill innovation, right? Was innovation possible because there was no regulation? So it's what do you think, is the balance possible?
Well, I think that's the $1 million question, Noelia. And honestly, yes, for sure, regulation kills innovation. I mean, there's no doubt about it. But then we also have to be aware that regulation sometimes creates innovation. We should be. This is not a black and white issue. This is one of the issues where you have to get it right, and you have to think about it, long and deep and profound. I mean, just to mention that, for example, Silicon Valley. I mean, we always see that, of course, from today as this kind of great hub of innovation. And yes, it's true. I mean, it's amazing what's going on there. But then if you look back in history, I mean, Silicon Valley, when you go back to the 50s and 60s, I mean, there's a lot of research done that shows that, for example, breaking up the baby bells, the telco, the AT&T, and opening basically, especially the patents they had from the Bell Labs was one of the reasons why we had semiconductor industry started in Silicon Valley, and that then created afterwards the personal computer, and that created software, and that went led us to the internet. So there is a clear line that you should see that it's not only by coincidence that these kind of things happen. There have been regulatory intervention, actually very harsh ones in the 20th century around technology of its time, of course. So the Bell Labs in itself were a regulatory kind of obligation on the telephone company, on AT&T, the monopoly in the United States, to invest a certain percentage of their revenues in R&D. And then they created the Bell Labs, and the Bell Labs created patents, and the patents need to be opened, and so on and so forth. So, I mean, you will see that there's a long line of that. So I would say that there is, it's not that easy to say that all kind of innovation only is created without regulation. And it's also true that regulation, if it's done in a bad way, can kill innovation. So for me, the key issue here is to find the right balance between both, and to be really, as Bill said, aware that we need to get it right, because I think, just going back to what Bill just said, I think that's totally right. We have a chance to build a kind of transatlantic understanding on these things, and that's maybe a good thing, because actually, if you look at on technology and how it's used on a world scale, there are parts of the world where technology really, from our point of view at least, when we look at it from a democratic point of view, it's used as in a dystopian way. And technology can be used very badly. So I think we have to find that sweet spot, so to speak, where we can use technology and create innovation, but do it clearly on the grounds of our value-based system. And that's a common task for the US and Europe. I think we're not so different in that regard. There might be differences, yes, but I mean, we're not so different that we cannot try to find this kind of democratic use of technology.
Right. And now that we're talking about the transatlantic relationship, US and Europe, we also had readings for the session we had last week that talked about the role of China, which has a completely different approach, right? How do you see that relationship between the US and Europe, and is anything going to change? Do you foresee with a changing presidency that is coming in January?
I would say, quickly on that question, two things. Yes, I think there's going to be a big change with this administration, because it's a whole different worldview. It's a whole different set of personalities. Frankly, I mean, we try not to sound too partisan these days in the US, but these are people who care about values, and that's going to be a change from what we've seen. So I think that's going to help a lot. Another change that I should have said in my previous remark that is really important is that just in the last couple of years, the CEOs of some of the largest Silicon Valley companies, Microsoft, Google, and Apple, to name three, have come out and called for regulation. Now that is a major sea change in the industry, and that put together with a new administration coming into power in this country, I think is the moment when we can actually not have this be a divide anymore, but more of a collaboration between the two sides. That's what I'm hoping. I don't even want to call them sides, the two societies, and I'm confident we can do it.
Thank you.
I think that regarding, going back to your question earlier about China, Europe, and the US, as I said, I think that clearly Europe and the US should try to find, as far as possible, common ground. It's not going to be exactly the same ground, but at least something that in the most important parts is going to the same direction. At the same time, and it's totally right what you said before, that I think Europe, and I think Billy also said that Europe is clearly leading globally regarding regulation of technology and of digitalization and of the situation we've seen around dominance and so on. And that's for sure. I think the thinking here is quite advanced on all of that, and you could clearly see after the publication of the Digital Markets Act and Digital Service Act actually this week, how from all parts of the world there have been reactions and there have been references to this piece of work, which is a major piece of work and a complicated piece of work. And we're not at the end of that debate. It's going to take on 2 years to get it done, and then let's see how it gets implemented. So it's not done and dusted. But I think that at least there have been a serious intent to come up with something that looks like you can somehow get a grip on many of the questions we've seen discussed in public and in the media over the last 2, 3, 4 years. What I think at the same time we should be aware is that you can only defend your values if you create value. I mean, that sounds a little bit strange, but I think that economic value, that means economic power, to be honest, is in the end a very important part in the geopolitical struggle we're going to see. So part of what we see currently of this kind of technology fragmentation between China and the US especially goes back to that understanding. I think the US are very grown up on that, and they know that technology is a key issue for power in the future. And I think there is clearly an understanding that you need to kind of position in that area very well, or you will not be able to defend your values. And I think that Europe sometimes is happy to be the referee, but the referee never wins the match. The two
doesn't play.
Yeah, the two teams on the pitch currently are the US and China playing. And I think that Europe is the referee. This is simplified, but I think that there's a lot of truth in that. So we also need to be aware in Europe that we should push into some form of human-centric digitalization, that we should use now the recovery money we have available in Europe to help, as I said before, small and medium enterprises, to have the public administration digitalized, to really go into the key technologies and create ecosystems and innovation in Europe. I think in the end, without this kind of value, economic value, you will very hardly be able to defend your values.
So that's another advantage of maybe bringing the US and Europe together, right? That we can bring the best of our backgrounds and idiosyncrasies, I guess. As we know, we can continue talking for another hour. It was proven in the debate we had around it last week, but we don't want to make this video too long. So we're going to cut it off. I just want to give you one last chance, especially Bill, you didn't have a chance on this one. So closing remarks from any of you?
I want to say that I have been thinking about Christoph's line about if you want to defend values, you need to create value since we talked last week. It's a really great thought. And I think it applies to everything we've been talking about in a certain way. And for example, the contrast between China's use of these technologies and, Europe and the US, what is the value being created, and also what is the objective it's driving toward. It's starkly different. You know, that's really kind of where we're heading now. And so there are big challenges, but it's also a very exciting moment, and that we're having people everywhere, not everywhere, but conversations like this are happening all over the place, and I think that's a very good sign.
That's a very good thing.
Thank you for having it.
Thank you, Christoph.
I totally agree. No, I totally agree. And just to say that I think that we have the chance really to kind of do these kind of debates, these reflections, and thanks to Aspen to give a platform for that, because it's more important than ever. And I think that very often we see that, unfortunately, policy debates are not always going in that direction, and they tackle symptoms, and they are not going into that kind of deeper thinking on what we should really kind of care about and what are longer term our interests here. So I think it's great that we have that. I think that it's a I don't want to sound cynical, but I think that also this pandemic has all given us a wake-up call that maybe we can really build back better, to say differently, you know, how we react as societies and economies. It's a great chance to kind of take that moment and be aware that, hey, we can do something better. We can be greener. We can be more digital in a good way, and really kind of shape our future. I think that's key.
Great. We have a great opportunity in front of us, and we're going to end on that good note. Thanking you very much again from your time, and I hope we have an opportunity to talk about this again very soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Good to see you guys.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Pleasure.
Thank you.